All right, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the suspension, the notice that was released on the Jamaica Stock Exchange on August 21st about the suspension of iCreate from trading. So we're going to talk about what that means, right? Go into the details of what we know so far, look at what the rules say and what the expected remediation process is, if any at all, and then what iCreate would need to do to get back in right standing with the JSE, right? So I have my good friend David Rose joining me in a second, but let's go through the notice first, set the context, and then we'll bring David on and we'll see where we go from there. All right, so let's jump into this, right? So it says here, this was released earlier today. So it says the JSE wishes to advise the investing public that in keeping with Junior Market Rule Appendix 2 Part 4, which we're going to go to that in a second, it has taken the decision to immediately suspend the trading in shares of iCreate pending the submission of its 2022 audited financial statements. The company had advised that it expects to publish its audited financials no later than September 30th, right? Yeah, so that's a context under which we're doing this video. We're going to keep it within the context, of course, about the suspension and what would need to be done. Other videos will likely be needed to kind of cover some of the other areas of iCreate, but I mean, let's see where the discussion goes. So David, welcome.
Night, Jeremy. Night. Can you hear me good?
Yeah, man, hearing you clearly. Thanks for joining me on such short notice, especially. All right, so it references here Junior Market Rule Appendix 2 Part 4. Let's probably start there. So I have the Junior Market Rule book here. Says Appendix 2. Let me try and find it. Do you have the page bookmarked?
No, I do not. We use Control F. We make lives easier for ourselves.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we're searching for, it says Appendix 2, Rule 4.
You want to go specific as that? Go to the list, go to the table of contents reference, and you're going to see the specific reference. I'm just going to scroll down to find the iCreate suspension right up again.
So, yeah, so part 4 here is where it's saying, right?
So the appendix will be closer to the back, actually.
Yeah, all right, let me just search, because this is how I found it earlier. So this part gives us some context here, but this is not the specific rule that they're referencing, right?
So let me just bring up the original market rule book myself, so I can actually tell you which page. But it's close to the back. It references the appendix. That's where the JSE has the that rule.
Let me just search directly for the appendix. Appendix 2. All right, so Appendix 2 is here, and it mentions 4, right?
So let me just look back again at what the suspension says. Appendix 2, Part 4, Reference 2.
Part 4.
So Appendix 2.
Yeah.
So I'm just skipping through.
All right. Because what I saw there.
All right, so Appendix 2, Part 4, Section 2. I'm just going back down. Part 4, 2.
Tell me the page number that you have.
Give me a second. I'm at Part 1 still. Just going through. Yes, so page 45 on my PDF. That's 133 pages. Page 45, Jermaine.
Page 45. All right.
Yeah. And we scroll. Actually, we're gonna scroll down to page 46. Page 46, audited financial statements.
Okay,
right there. Yeah.
Here we go. All right,
so
cool.
they reference part 4.2, which would, it's this, but yeah, it can start from there. So
yeah, all right. So let's do we just go through the entire section 2, right? Audited financial
no, we don't
statements.
need to. We don't need to. Because the key
Okay,
parts that are highlighted here is that the company submits audited reports, but the part that iCreate is falling under the suspension is with reference to part E. So we can go
okay.
through part A and part B, so a person can appreciate what audited financials are, and in part E, where we could explain the breach.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So it says here, notwithstanding the provisions of paragraph 2D, junior market companies who do not submit audited financials required by this part 4.2 of appendix within 90 days of the date with which they are due for submission, the JSE may be suspended from the junior market until such time they're able to submit same. Right. So based on this, David, when exactly were the financials due, the audited financials for 2022?
So under this approach, iCreate took it to submit in 45 and 90. They submitted their unaudited Q4 within 45 days, which was due by February 14, and they would have been required to submit their audited numbers by March 30. So another company that takes this approach is Epley, for example. So they submitted their unaudited Q4 by February 14 and submitted their audited numbers by March 30. Actually, on March 30 to the date.
Yeah.
Other JSE companies, like for example, L.E.A.R.N, submit their audited numbers in 60 days. But because iCreate to do it at 45 and 90, it has been due since March 30, 2023. So it's almost 5 months plus outstanding.
Yeah. And we've seen, so do you know if the rule book speaks on the consequences to follow suspension? I'm assuming it does somewhere.
It does, but that's at a higher page. I'd have to reference it again for you. But
Okay.
as you're referencing right there is section E. Can I see section E in the meantime for persons, and I'll just pull other parts for you.
All right. All right. So let me go through here. All right. So one sec while we find that. I don't want you guys to see us scrolling here, but so
No. I wanted to know, Jermaine. I just saying this read part E right there about the actual breach for iCreate in terms of what the JSE applied the suspension.
we went through that already, man. So it mentioned that there's a 90-day requirement, and then once that is in place, then pretty much they may be suspended until such time they're able to submit same. But I remember you were mentioning today that they have a specific deadline with which to submit, or then there could be further action, right? So that's the part that I wanted us to get to.
So page 21, delisting or suspension.
Okay, 21.
So right there.
Yes, this is one I had found earlier as well. All right, so it says the JSE may, in its absolute discretion, delist or suspend trading of the admitted participating voting shares and other admitted securities of a junior market company for any of the following reasons. All right. So one, the junior market company fails or ceases to comply with any of the requirements of the admission agreement. If, in the opinion of the JSE, the junior market company has engaged in conduct that has adversely affected the reputation of the JSE, which I think this would be included in. And I'm looking for where it says specifically about the rules of the submitting the reports. That's the part.
No, so Jermaine, you referenced a while ago, section 14 AI. So where it says that the company does not meet the admission requirements, part of the ongoing requirements to be a listed company.
Timely release of the statements, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So what I want to understand, and this is the part that I wanted to kind of see where we go from here, right? So that's the part that I'd want to discuss with you now, David, is where we go from here, right? So since this notice would have come out today, I figure we have some form of point of reference, right? Because we're talking about in the Telegram group another company that would have been delisted in the past, what that process was. So can you go through that for us?
So the only junior market company to have been delisted would have been Sweet River Abattoir. And in the case of that company, what had happened was that they hadn't submitted, their quarterly reports. I think the audit report was also outstanding extended period of time. And what had also happened was that the company did not meet the board member requirement. So a person's always asked, why do board members, need to be, independent board members by the company's board? It's part of the JSE rules. So when there is resignation of several directors from CEO's board, they no longer meet some of the admission requirements. And the JSE just, took their time, and just a month before COVID was declared a pandemic, back in February 2020, the JSE delisted the shares. And that, would have come after an extended period of time whereby the JSE would have allowed the company to seek remedy. Because remember, the JSE makes money when companies are listed on the stock exchange and persons can actually trade these shares. To delist a company means less income for them, at the same time is a negative sight on the overall market. So companies are given a lot of leeway in terms of trying to make sure that they're remedied when they are breached of the JSE rules.
Yeah. So based on where things stand for iCreate now, because I mean this is something that we've kind of it's been late for a while, right? What I've seen notices come out. I believe the first notice that was mentioned
that came out in April, and that was right there, not there. So it was in April, and that was regards to delayed financial statements. And that said it should have come out by May 31. Yeah. So all the financial statements and annual report. So that post right there said it should have been published by May 31. But the thing is, it wasn't published on May 31, and iCreate never made any updates to the stock exchange or shareholders up until last week.
Yeah.
Tuesday, which is a day after they actually said that their Q2 report was going to be late.
Yeah. So this was a notice that was released. That we just
that was a prior release. Yeah, that was a prior release.
So they're saying that they would publish it on or before May 31st. So May, June, July, August. So 4 months later, after having committed to sending it by May 31st, which by then it was already late, is what we're looking at here, right? Then we saw a subsequent notice
that came out last week.
Yeah. So the interesting thing that I'm seeing here, David, is that pretty much at that point, after May 31st, they were pretty much eligible for suspension at that point, right?
Well, the thing is that the JSE removed remember when the pandemic originally hit, the JSE gave companies an extra 45 days to submit their audited financial statements and annual report based on the delays that would have occurred because of the pandemic and other factors. But for context, the JSE actually terminated that actual extension period as of March 3rd, 2023. So if a company did not formally apply as at that point, then they'd have been in breach, and it was up to the JSE's discretion whether or not they would have wanted to suspend a company. iCreate internal disclosure, close to the end of April, which would have been the time when their annual report would have also been due, to say that they're planning to submit by May 31. That never occurred. And, after the company put out the other release about the delayed Q2, a number of persons now reported iCreate because they were perturbed at the situation and on the developments that happened in recent times.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was trying to find essentially when their last set of financials actually came out.
That would have been the March 31 financials right there to your right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I would be careful of those financials are the way, Jermaine.
Yeah, I'm a little bit apprehensive look at them actually, because so
The last of audited financials we would have had go back all the way to 2021.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when we look at the unaudited Q4 numbers versus the unaudited Q1 numbers for the 2022 period,
Yeah.
there are two different balance sheet figures, which are quite a material difference.
Well, maybe we should look into that, right? Because that so this is kind of what I'm thinking, right? I will kind of come off this for a second. So I mean, again, this is just kind of, this is making an assumption based on limited information, right? So let me just kind of say this to everybody. You know, for this, and the reason why we're covering this, I'll also say that we're trying to bring the attention to bring attention to the situation because there are shareholders of iCreate who are potentially community members, and we want to be able to have this video to inform you of what is likely to happen to your shares now based on the situation you're in. So we're actually going to be covering that in a second, where David and I will talk about what will happen to shareholders and their shares, right? So I go into that to say that based on my understanding, if it is that your numbers were due by March 31st, you weren't able to do them, they're late, and you pushed it back to May 31st. A few days ago, which is in August, you pretty much asked for a further extension. My assumption would be, as somebody looking on the outside in, that those numbers are not yet ready, or either they're not ready, or two, there's some major red flag that is preventing them from being published, right? I don't know what your take on that, David. Again, that would be extreme, speculation. We don't have anything to say that's the case. But to me, if something is due, you publish the notice that it's going to be delayed, which means at least you have some intention to publish it by X date. Because it can't be that you're necessarily buying time, because at some point that deadline will come and you'll have to present the numbers, right? So that's kind of my assessment just based on what I've seen so far. So I don't know what's your take on it.
So to give further context, when you sit back and look at the whole situation developments, we have to remember something keenly. Back in 2019, SSL Venture Capital, which is now MFS Financial Services Limited, they would have released their audited financials after an extended period of time, and that report wasn't even really an audited report. The auditor said that they could not verify several items, and they were not going to present an opinion on the report. And the JSE said, you guys take this back and come back with a real audited report.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. This happened in 2019. So even if iCreate wanted to release an audited report right now, you have to remember, if the auditors give a qualified opinion, the JSE can actually tell iCreate, take those numbers back and sort yourself out. So what does that mean? So if persons who actually sit there and read what the audited numbers or even the auditor's note says, you have different auditor opinions. I'm not going to go into all of them, but to give a very simple overlay, when an auditor gives an unqualified opinion, it's simply saying that there is nothing further to express with regards to any potential discrepancies for those financials.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that the company's financials are accurate to the T. What the auditor is saying, hey, we're giving a unqualified opinion that based on what we've done through our work and everything else, these numbers are okay. If you have a qualified opinion, the auditor is basically saying, we realistically speaking cannot, give a definitive opinion on what is presented here, and that the users of these financials should take these numbers with extreme caution. So if iCreate does release their audited report come, September 30, and it's a qualified opinion, or they don't express an opinion either, the JSE can say to iCreate, take by these numbers, which would further extend the extension of the company's status on the JSE regarding its ordinary shares.
Yeah.
So you can see how even if the company does produce audited numbers by, September 30, the JSE can still, say, hey, go back and fix this up. And that's just it. We don't know, where iCreate stands on the spectrum with regards to, its auditors and auditors, doing their assessments. But with all that's happening in recent times and everything else, the auditors are only going to get the unqualified opinion when everything has been satisfied to the best of their, ability to verify as has been provided by iCreate.
Yeah.
And in the statement that we saw with iCreate, they pointed that, based on the acquisitions and mergers they did last year, which have been included, well, they were seeking to acquire Visual Vibe, which, what they said kind of took them out of focus of the business and everything else. And that's where they said they relate to the audited. But the thing is, it's one thing to have audited financials based on an accountant shortage going on right now, or auditor shortage. What's another thing whereby, because of your controls or protocols that being as strong, you could not present something appropriate to the auditor to complete within a specified time. And in that same breath, auditors do complete jobs and they get paid after the specific period.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? So there have been, so even Siboney, for example, I recall, reading their 2022 audited numbers whereby audit fee was, including the expenses. But when you checked the notes for the balance sheet, which showed payables, it showed the audit fee was an outstanding item to be paid. So companies can have their audits completed and they pay the auditors, after the period has been completed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that pointing out, we don't, the big issue with iCreate right now, we don't know where on the spectrum they are satisfy the audit's requirements, because an audit in terms of financials is not about just, all right, see our numbers here, check it, push it back out. No. Yeah. Auditors are required to do at least some basic due diligence during the process. What does that mean? If you say your company is expecting to, for example, collect X amount of money from these clients who are listed as receivables by this particular time, auditor might say, based on, the historical collection period and so forth, that we disagree with this and we're only going to agree that the company should have a higher impairment provision regarding the receivables. And that's just one example. The auditors also call customers. So for example, let us say you are a client of a, argument's sake, a subscription provider, right? Let us say iCreate was a partner subscription service to you, the client. The auditor would randomly select any number of clients, contact them and say, did iCreate provide the service to you? Did you pay on this particular date? So it's not a process that people appreciate, because it's a lot of work and it's very difficult to reduce it even within the 60-day time limit. Because even if you have everything in a row, if the auditors have a particular major item, such as an acquisition or other event that requires them to do further checks and diligence procedures, the cost of the audit is one thing, but it's going to take longer to complete the audit, because remember, we should not forget that.
I get that, David, but I mean, so we're standing here from the date that it was, because essentially you've had now 8 months to work on the numbers, right? Because as soon as 2023 starts, you're already of the mindset and preparing as a company to have those numbers ready. They're just due March 31st. All right, so I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit, David. So this release also came out, which was interesting to me to see, right? iCreate Limited hereby gives notice of the sale of 20,000 ordinary shares in iCreate by a director on August 16th, right? And again, this was one of the conversations in the group. Was this a legal sale? Based on the situation that they found themselves in, and I mean, yeah. So any context you can give us on that one?
Well, to oversimplify it, this technically is in breach of JSE rules and the Securities Act. And the reason why I'm pointing out this context is with respect to the fact that we have in from the JSE on the Monday, which should have been August 14, that their Q2 numbers would have been late, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should be submitted by end of the month, right?
Yeah.
No. The way the protocol works is if the company's quarterly report, even audited financials have an extended delay period, no trading in the securities is supposed to be taking place until that report does come out.
Yeah.
So the fact that the company submitted a report on Monday saying, hey, our quarterly report is going to be delayed till month end. And then on Tuesday, you're going to say that your audited numbers are going to come up by December. That's a serious problem.
Yeah.
Because as a director, you'll be privileged to more information than the person on the outside. And I can't. I'm trying to look for the rules that speak to, which speak to the JSE. We speak to like the block or the restriction for insiders in this case to be trading. But the thing is, I said at least they brought up Jermaine and spoke to somebody earlier. They said, hey, it wasn't them. And they sent me something. And when I heard, I was like, this raises even more red flags in my opinion.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm like,
Jermaine.
Yeah,
Jermaine. The parties that I've seen there as directors say, hey, it wasn't them. And came out saying that it's somebody else. And the records right there show that person doesn't have anything. You have another problem. And that is just, right now, the concern regarding iCreate.
Yeah.
Things just do not make sense, and it just kind of falls back on the fact that right now persons are concerned with all that's going on, because we had a SSL earlier this year, then to have this and these other dependents, it's very concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So David, let's kind of switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about what this means for shareholders, right? Because we have, again, I mean, looking at just, I mean, a year ago, it's so interesting how things have come, right? Because a year ago, iCreate was actually one of those companies. I think it was around this time they were performing well in terms of their stock price. There were talks of rights issue. There was a sort of definitely a lot of interest around the company. There were talk of the rights issue coming up and acquisition we're hearing about at the time. I think we recently heard about the Get Paid acquisition at that point. So things were kind of building up for them, right? So no doubt a lot of persons would have been kind of interested in the company, maybe would have taken an investment in the company. What happens to shareholders now is what I'd want us to get into.
Oh, I gave a thread earlier today on Twitter.
Yeah, man. And I have it. Let me bring it up.
But to give some context, the reality is that if the company does, meet the requirement and submit the audited financial statements to the JSE, and the JSE in turn, accepts, those numbers, then everything is relatively whole. Context relatively meaning that the suspension will be removed. You could then go and buy or sell more iCreate shares as you please.
Yeah.
However, JSE is like, no, we're not going to accept this. Or iCreate is even delayed any further.
Yeah.
That is when you're going to have further issues, for iCreate shareholders. And where is the problem? What happens is that the Jamaica Stock Exchange, it is a secondary market for the buying and selling of shares, ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? So let us say you go to a used car dealer. They are secondary market because somebody probably bought the car from the manufacturer, which have been the primary market, and the secondary market is persons buying and selling in the same set. The Jamaica Stock Exchange is the largest secondary market in Jamaica for other services and intents. So when you buy your shares in the JSE, you're not required to pay stamp duty, you're not required to, contact company's office, you're not required to go through extra procedures to actually, ownership in a company.
Mm-hmm.
In the current circumstances, with iCreate being suspended, none of that can happen, meaning that you cannot sell the shares to somebody else, cannot buy more shares if you want to buy more shares, just in limbo. And in the case of, the Sweet River situation, when the company was delisted, what happened was that those shareholders would still be shareholders in Sweet River.
Yeah.
However, the company would technically, not have a secondary market for ownership to be traded.
Mm-hmm.
So what that meant,
yeah.
yeah.
No, go
So
ahead.
what that meant is that, in effect, in turn, what it in turn means is that, as a result, persons who would have wanted to exit Sweet River would have had to, as a result, find somebody else willing to buy the shares from them. And then, even at that point, they would have had to go through the procedure of, paying stamp duty, and through company's office, it's internationally registered. So you can understand, the headache that comes with a company being delisted, and in turn, the difficulty that shareholders will be faced with, because if the company is, let us say, turn itself around privately, and the company is paying dividends, you're fine. But a company being delisted in any circumstance is kind of an indication of either things going horribly wrong or something going very wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm taking from what you're saying, David, is this, right? So right now, shareholders are pretty much in limbo, right? Because you
Like
kind of have
SSL
to wait.
clients.
Yeah, because the thing is, if I'm a shareholder, based on what I'm seeing, right? Because the first reflex in a situation like this is to typically for some investors to want to liquidate their position and cash out. You can't do that, right? Now, if somebody would have been on the market, you could pretty much sell your shares at a low price and move on. But right now, on the other side, persons who could potentially want to buy those shares, they don't know what they're buying into, right? So because you don't know the state of the company's finances since the start of the year, right? So that kind of puts you in a very difficult position where for somebody to potentially buy those shares from you, they're betting on the future of the company in the normal case, and we don't know what the future of the company is because we don't know the current state of the company. Right?
And remember, when the company is private, there's no requirement per se for there to be disclosures, to shareholders, for there to be quarterly financials.
Yeah.
There's the things that, so the thing about the JSE and any stock exchange is that because the company is publicly listed, the things that the company has to do, a private company isn't necessarily required to do. So your companies in Jamaica, that don't produce audited financials, because for them, they're keeping their books in check, pay a GOG what GOG needs to get. They don't necessarily use a bank to certain things. So you get what I'm saying? So
all right. I lost you there, David.
Any questions on the chat?
I'm gonna go through it in a second. I wanted to kind of look at the share price. I mean, for a long while, right? iCreate was pretty much this is from about 2020 to about 2022, right? So for over 2 years through the entire heights of the pandemic, the stock price would have been below $1. Then around April 2022, we started to move above, went as high as I believe 490 in July 2022. And then since that high, right? And I remember this being around the time when persons again were kind of expecting, the rights issue, expecting the acquisition of Visual Vibes to be completed. Since then, it has not. It's down. What's that? Close to maybe 80% since then, right? So and look at these volumes. There will be shareholders who would, I imagine, be expecting that there would have been some, update as to how things are gonna go, right? So I say, Peter Gay is asking, what's going to happen or what does this all mean? That's what we're talking about here, right? So if you're a shareholder, Peter Gay pretty much means that you have to wait and see, right? There's not much that you can do because you don't know the state of the company, right? So there needs to be some more information. I kind of wish that the JSE would at some point give us some. So I know that it says here that the company, in the notice that the JSE posted, let me go back to that. It says that the company has advised that it expects to publish no later than September 30th. So I imagine that they're going to say, let's wait till September 30th to see what happens, right? To give the company the opportunity, which means as a shareholder, you're waiting 5 to 6 more weeks just to see what will happen, right? I would imagine that if October 1st comes and there's no report, then things are going to be further eroded in terms of confidence in the company and things of that nature, right? So it's really a challenging situation if you're an existing shareholder. So I say Jay Simpson asking any update on the status of the real estate projects. So Jason, or Jay Simpson rather, we've got no real updates from the company apart from their Q1 financials, right? And David and I were discussing that we're not entirely sure, at least from a numbers perspective, that you want to have updated numbers, right? Because let's assume these are valid, right? This still would have been for Q1, which is 6 months ago. So you don't really know the state of the company as at right now. Let me see if this mentioned any of the real estate projects. Company outlook, spoke about the acquisition of Visual Vibe here. So that's it. Yeah, so last I heard about the real estate, I believe I would have asked Tyrone in our interview that we did in July. He mentioned that it was, let me not misspeak. Jay Simpson, I recommend that you go and watch that interview. I believe he would have spoken about it, but I don't remember exactly what he said, right? Shellen is asking, who are the directors?
So I can give some context there. Hopefully this thing doesn't reset on me again. But it's a little bit of confusion because some directors are not listed in iCreate's, shareholder list, but from what I can.
All right, probably lost David. He'll be right back. We're going to answer the question of who are their directors. I figure he'll join back in a second. I'm checking to see if it mentions their directors on their website. Here's David. Hey, David.
Yeah, Chrome. What's happening when I'm on my phone and the Chrome refreshes the page when you go to a different page. But what I was saying was that, let me just refresh the names again. So you have Arlene Martin, who was the chair of the company prior to Taryn's resignation. You have Ivan Carter. You have Ricardo Allen. You have Lauren Peart. You have Dania Joywint. You have Hector.
Where you reading from, David?
Excuse me, Jeremy, what you said?
Where are you reading from?
So it's basically piece of documentation. Okay. So yeah, so Stephen Hector, that's his name. So the reason why I have to do documentation, Jermaine, is that there are director names who are not listed when I check in the Q1 report. Yes, I'm listed in the Q1 report, so it's kind of confusing. So for the avoidance of doubt, it's better for me to just use the annual report from 2021 alongside the shareholding list or other documentation otherwise. So if you go to iCreate Q4 2023 report, it lists the directors right here.
Wait, Q4 2023, you mean 2021?
Sorry, 2022, apologies. Yeah. Okay. But at that point, note, you have Adrian Smith, for example, his name is listed here. And you don't have the company secretary listed either. So you cannot see what I'm talking about in terms of iCreate, that because there isn't an up-to-date director listing in their shareholder disclosures, you have to be going back and forth over different documentations to kind of find what's going on, right? The 12 months in the 2022, you're right there. So page 8. And this really shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
All directors should be listed so persons have an idea as to who is where and what. So page 8. So at that point, note, you're not seeing Adrian Smith right there.
Yeah.
Nor Ivan Carter.
Yeah.
And these are persons who have been appointed at the start of 2022, and we're looking at a report at the end of 2022, and their names are not listed. And even when we look at even further at when we even look further at the Q1 report, we're still not seeing the names listed. So that's why I said that you really have to just be juggling all over the place to kind of know who is a director and not.
Yeah, man. I'll give person some update here. So Ricardo Allen has resigned from that role, right? We saw that come out for one-on-one.
Wait. No. Tyrone resigned from one-on-one's board.
Yes, correct. Thank you. I was actually gonna bring up the notice to verify. Sorry about that. And Arlene Martin is now interim CEO of the company.
Ivan Carter is the interim chairman.
Yeah. All right. So there are some changes that would have been made there. I did reach out to Arlene for an interview. The feedback I got is that now is not the best time, and that she's focused on just getting things in order. Which, I mean, considering the fact she would have inherited things just a couple of days ago, I would imagine that it would make sense to try and get some understanding as to where things are, because my take on that situation, we don't know the circumstances under which Tyrone resigned. The timing of his resignation is definitely a little interesting, based on the fact that you'd have seen the notice of the financials being further delayed, and then he resigned. So of course there's some speculation there. But again, that's something that I don't think it would make sense to go into, because we don't have any evidence of anything that would have speculated. So at this point, let me just find that. No. So David, before we do that, right? Because I want to take questions from our audience here. Now, quickly go through the thread that you had shared, because we covered most of it already. but you had referenced it. I'll share it in the chat just in case persons want to look through it. But is there anything specifically that persons would need to know in relation to this?
The second tweet I made is really important because persons were contacting me asking if iCreate stopped functioning, and I said no. So persons are confusing what the suspension of ordinary share trading is. The tweet above that, Jeremy, with the train. Yeah. Persons are confusing what the suspension of trading in a company's shares means versus the business. So iCreate shares being suspended from trading on the JSE doesn't mean the business operating.
Yeah.
It just means that you cannot buy or sell ownership in iCreate right now.
Yeah.
So the business is still functioning because you have companies in the past that are suspended from trading on the JSE, and your business is normal. Even during takeover situations, and shares are suspended, for a particular period of time, pending the processing of the whole offer, the business continues as normal.
Yeah.
There is no disruption in the business like that. So I hope that kind of gives some context to people as to really what I'm explaining, because a company's shares being suspended from the JSE and delisted does not indicate that the company in turn is in bad health. So I have to explain that carefully because persons are not aware, because some persons are coming into the JSE for the last 2 years or are just looking on and don't know better and think that the suspension is equating to the business of operating and similar for delisting. So that's why I have to kind of explain that in detail, because a lot of persons really don't know better and they're just trying to seek information. And this is kind of why, the JSE should do better with some of these disclosures, because there's an assumption, and I'm guilty of it at times as well, that when I speak or other persons speak, that the readers are aware of what is being mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's just, sad, because in this case, as I'm pointing out, a person on the regular road just hearing the equities has been suspended and don't hear the other parts about from trading. And they're just like, wait, iCreate stop function? And that is where you can have further repercussions happening in the public domain or for the business.
Yeah, man. Because even the timing of this, and so we're in the middle of the first IPO for the year, and this is one of those things that could impact the confidence of investors, right? So, just not understanding that these issues that are being addressed here are things. So the suspension, to me, based on the evidence that we have, would have been actually delayed, right? It might have been best for it to have taken place before.
Remember, the JSE is inclined to give businesses or companies or issuers leeway. Remember, the JSE is no longer a private entity with only response to or answers to the brokers. The JSE is a publicly listed company on their own exchange and is seeking to always, grow revenue and grow the business. So as a result, there is that, situation where, there's less inclination to take certain drastic steps. And, I mentioned that Twitter earlier today when somebody was asking me that based on, how our financial system operates and the lack of education regarding it, you kind of have regulators being apprehensive of taking certain actions because of the significant repercussions that can occur as a result, because you can yourself.
But then the question to that, David, how are shareholders protected? Because that's a part I go to.
By God, Allah, Yahweh, or whatever God you believe in.
Listen, because to me, that is a part that I'm concerned with, because if it is that there's a framework that says things are supposed to be done by a certain date or certain things will happen, it's a part of holding the companies accountable to these things if these rules are enforced, because they're there for the sustainability of the market and the protection of potential investors, right? So we saw where the SSL incident would have impacted a lot of persons who are still trying to get their shares 8 months later. And then now you could potentially have a situation where you have another company, i.e. iCreate, where shareholders now are going to be trying to get their funds, potentially for a while. So those things really impact, again, as I said, the confidence of investors in the market, which impacts all of us, right? If there's no L.E.A.R.N Grow Invest doing an IPO review or a prospectus review if there's nobody interested in investing, right? So it impacts all of us, right? We can't get cap gains from the market if there's no market, right? So it's all right. So we have 10 minutes to go. So I want to take some questions here, and we can just kind of keep the answers short and kind of go through as much as we can. Shellyan is asking, what is the business background resume of running successful business that the directors have? So I don't know how to answer that one. Go ahead, David.
So the thing is, I'm not fully aware of some of the directors' backgrounds to that extent, but for example, L.E.A.R.N is associated with Blue Dot, which is a subsidiary of GK. 101 is a publicly listed company, JSE as well. Adrian Smith, the CEO of Equity Capital Management, which has a stake in Dollar. So these are persons, who would be aware of certain, procedures and protocols, but at the same time, I really cannot speak much further to their business background either.
Yeah. So those persons David mentioned, I'm familiar with them as well. So Philip asked a great question, right? If the reports in question are provided to JSE tomorrow, will trading, resume tomorrow?
No, and I say that wholeheartedly because, as I mentioned at the beginning earlier in the video or the whole discussion, SSLVC 2019, the company submitted their auditor report, and the JSE said no, we are not going to take this. If your company's auditor report has a qualified opinion or it has no express opinion, then the JSE can reject your submission. And the thing is, SSLVC actually requested a 2-month suspension to go and sort themselves out to then get an audit report that was, unqualified. So if iCreate to produce a report tomorrow, if the audit opinion is qualified or there's no opinion in the no opinion by the auditors, the JSE can just reject it altogether. So if the company produces a report tomorrow, if the auditors give some hesitation in their opinion, then the JSE can be like, no, take your time and come back.
So here's my take, David. I would actually raise more questions than anything else, because if you asked for an extension to the 30th of September and you produce the report a day after you're suspended, I don't know if I'm going to trust the contents of that report if it's produced a few days after you asked for 7 more weeks to produce it, because the notice did not say we'll present the report by August 31st. It says September 30th. So it means that you need a certain amount of time to put it together. But I guess the point that Philip may be raising is it simply a matter of producing the report that kind of breaks us out of this suspended state, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because the JSE, still has to play a functioning part in the regulation of the market. And if companies were just submitting qualified reports and just reports where auditors are saying we can't verify a good number of things like revenue and so forth, then nobody will have trust in the companies being invested in either. So there is a balance that has to be maintained regarding, all these developments, because if the audited financial statements don't give you, surety that there's no, for example, misdeeds happening in the background, but the auditors, who are supposed to be independent of the company they're auditing, or whose report they produce, should give you an indication as to the company being able to maintain certain controls, standards, and protocols in their operations.
The auditors are pretty much on the line as well, right? So they have
remember
to ensure
L.E.A.R.N, Jermaine? And for those who don't know, Enron was a company that was growing like crazy in the early days, like probably like 1990 going to early 2000s. When it came out that the company was a significant fraud, their auditing firm, which was Arthur Andersen, they went bust. Like all their clients just left them altogether. So whenever people always say about the big four auditing firms, it used to be Big Five. But because of Arthur Andersen, that auditing firm with all those years of history and everything else just went under.
Yeah.
So the auditors also have their reputation on the line if they're to release a report which is quite questionable and they did not do their own due diligence to check certain procedures and protocols where they should have been doing their checks.
Yeah. All right. So let me go through some more of these comments here because we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. So Anthony, I saw this comment earlier. What if I told you that some of these companies are actually Ponzi schemes? I'm not sure how you got to that conclusion. No, I don't think, and I'll say this in as best a way as I possibly can, I don't think we should make blanket statements. Right? So what we're discussing here and what's happening here is specifically based on what is happening with iCreate. Now we have a couple of names in the chat that persons have been talking about. I don't think that iCreate it. So let me probably go back a step because Anthony was mentioning this idea of virtual companies. Now I look at them as service-based companies. For example, the L.E.A.R.N as a service-based company. iCreate business model has actually changed a few times, right? So it's actually hard to determine what business iCreate is in, right? So based on what has been described, if you look at companies like Get Paid, if you look at Visual Vibe, if you look at the real estate ventures, they weren't in their core business anymore, at least the company that they started out with, right? That's not the same as the L.E.A.R.N. The L.E.A.R.N.'s business model has pretty much remained consistent. I say even comments to One Great Studio, the company that's out now in terms of IPO, not the same type of business. One Great Studio is a service-based business, right? Valid, legitimate service-based business that is serving clients, across the world, right? Generating revenues that's kind of in a different bracket than the company that we're talking about here. So I don't think these kind of comparisons where you say these companies, I think it's fair to say these companies if it's the same industry, same situation, same context, etc. But it's not. I wouldn't call it a virtual company because they're doing more than just marketing for clients, right? So I'll just say that it doesn't feel like the right video to kind of go in that more. Let me see if there are any other comments that I can bring up.
So I saw Phil's comment a while ago where he was, speaking about, so he said, but if the report is not rejected by the JSE, then there'll be no issue, right? Tomorrow, just an example. Just want to know how soon afterwards it should be readmitted given an acceptable report.
Yeah.
So basically, the JSE would, admit them back wholeheartedly, everything, within the next trading day, once, the review is complete by their internal parties and they deem that, everything is appropriate and meeting the standards that they require under their rules.
Yeah.
So let's say the company is report on Wednesday to the public, and the JSE said it meets our standards, carry it to go back to trading on Thursday. So remember, the JSE just can go in their system and just really allow iCreate to be traded again.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult process. It's literally a digital process, but the company actually satisfying their preferences is a very critical thing because I'm sure nobody wants to get a qualified auditor's report from an iCreate.
Yeah, the fact that it was suspended, I would imagine that they wouldn't be in a rush to resume trading unless they're able to properly ventilate the report. And what I mean by that is, I don't think it will be a next day thing. I think it will take a couple of days. So even if the reports are published, I don't think it's a next day kind of thing in my opinion. And I say that because if you remember also, David, there was an email that was submitted by I think JSE
Investors United to with FSC
because
and
I think the suspension is going to raise other questions relating to the company overall. So there may be some hesitation to just say, well, let's just resume. Let's maybe ensure that things are properly ventilated, right? So yeah, so Tavares is saying it here, one company under fire and you want to kind of group everybody. I agree with that statement, right? Because I mean, I don't think that's a wise thing to do, especially for those who are uneducated about the market. Because a lot of persons have been saying, for example, 2 resignations in the last month is not a good look. There are 2 different situations, right? 2 different contexts under which the resignation of Kadeen and the resignation of Tyrone, I don't think those are the same situations. The companies aren't in the same situations, and the timing of it is not great, sure, but I mean, if you look at it from the broader perspective that people, no, let me not say that. I was gonna say people change jobs all the time. It's not quite the same thing. You can't look at it that way. But at least from Kadeen's perspective, he made himself available shortly after to address public concerns, right? So I think that's the difference I see here. Now, will Tyrone allow himself to be interviewed? I don't know, right? I've not asked. He has not reached out to me, so I don't know, right? If we see him appear on a program to explain the situation, I don't know how much weight that may hold, though, if the numbers don't come out, right? Because I think there's also an issue with Tyrone now when it comes to trust, right? Because on our last interview on July 6th, he mentions that the numbers would be ready by August 14th or 15th. We're past that date, and then there's a request for further extension, right? So that, to me, if I was a shareholder, I'd be looking at, can I trust what this person is telling me about a company I'm interested in investing in, or I already have shares in, right? So thanks for the context, Philip. Yes, I think we addressed that. Final question I'll take here is, Tyrone wanted iCreate to become a creative group of companies. Did he explain how all the companies he was buying would work together or synergize to make them? He did, Jado. He kind of gave us, pieces as to how he saw it coming together. I'd encourage you to go as far back as the EGM that we did with them August of last year, right? He spoke about it, what his plan was. It was a vision that persons bought into, and you saw that as evidence in terms of the share price for last year. So persons bought into the vision. He was able to articulate the vision. So even what Bay is saying, that Tyrone is poor at sales, I actually disagree, because he was able to sell persons on the vision of the company, and investors bought into that vision and thought there was an opportunity for gains in terms of their investment. So I don't think that he's a poor salesman or poor at sales. Jay Simpson, post that question again. Let me see. Should it be concerning how interconnected these JSE companies are, or is it normal? Again, when you say these companies, there is a relationship between One-on-One and iCreate from the perspective that there was, I think Tyrone served on One-on-One's board, and we see that Ricardo Allen was a director in iCreate. Apart from, when you say interconnected, I'm not sure what else you're referring to.
So I think he's probably referring to, just the common relationships that exist among the different JSE companies. So for example, you have JMB owning Hydrocore Financial Company, Pru owning JMB Group, Barrett owning Proven. So that's probably, where he's coming from. But the reality is Jamaica is a small place and we have a fraction of companies listed on the JSE.
Okay.
There are quite...
He gave some context. He said one-on-one iCreate dollar equity.
Oh.
Now, that is so the interesting thing that I see here, and trust me, this could be, I think, another video, right? That kind of relationship between these three companies, because I think we can give some context there, right? David, before we close out, in terms of a relationship between one-on-one and equity, I don't really see that direct
That doesn't
connection.
necessarily exist. So what I think he's referring to is the fact that you would have had Ricardo one-on-one on iCreate's board, and then Deputy's CEO on iCreate's board. But context, Ricardo and Tyrone have a prior history, and Ricardo joined the board after the departure of the former board, and in the case of Adrian, in the case of Deputy, they provided iCreate a lifeline through a loan, converted those to shares, and Adrian Smith was appointed to the board of iCreate, based on Deputy's standing. So it kind of makes sense.
I mean, I would just say I personally would remove one-on-one from that interconnection, because just based on what I've observed, right? So Tyrone is I believe affiliated with one-on-one just based on the history, as David mentioned, but based on how one-on-one is operated, based on what I see from the company, I don't necessarily see an interconnection there. Now, that whatever connection was there is pretty much being severed with this resignation of Tyrone here for one-on-one's board. And I mean, that separation is actually interesting to see, right? Because, and the timing of it is interesting to see as well. And what I'm interested in, David, is to see right now, because of the investment that the equity would have made, right? Kadeen would have mentioned on taking stock that he was looking forward to working with Tyrone, providing him with support, potentially helping things to recover. That was about a week and a half ago, right? So that's I don't know if there's still an opportunity for them to do that. I would imagine now that based on what has happened, Kadeen is in the best position he would be in to offer help to the company to protect the equities investment. So I mean, he has the best chance now, as opposed to if he was still CEO of Dollar, he wouldn't probably have the bandwidth. So yeah.
Agreed. And the person asking in the chat about Barrett having a second proven. So for context, JMB Group Limited owns 23% of Sagicor Financial Company Limited, which is the parent company of Sagicor Group. Proven Group Limited owns 20.01% of JMB Group Limited, and Barita owns about 5% of Proven Group Limited. So that's what I mentioned when I said Barita owns Proven.
Okay. All right. Guys, do you have any final questions? I think it's a good time to wrap. David, thanks so much for your support as usual. We'll definitely see what information comes out. If you're joining this video and it's your first time to this community, you're welcome to join our Telegram group. I'm going to post that link now in the chat. You're welcome to kind of take part in the conversation that we have daily about the market and what we think are good opportunities. And so I'll just say a final thing about that same interconnection that we're speaking about now. I don't look at it as anything of concern. Reason being, so let's say that David and I were to have publicly listed companies now. Based on David and I's relationship, I would probably serve on David's board if he would have me. David would probably be affiliated with my company in some way in terms of Learn, Grow, Invest because of our history, right? We've been working together, creating content, supporting each other for the last couple of years. We have that relationship. So 5 years from now, if I have a company that lists, David is likely going to be a part of it, and so on. So it's not a stretch that they were friends before. They're business people, entrepreneurs, they have companies. There's an opportunity to support each other and serve. I do think there's a chance to separate business from personal, right? Because trust is a big part of business. I can call David tomorrow and say, David XYZ, David does it for me because he knows me, he trusts me. I don't necessarily have that relationship with somebody I don't know. So it's common for persons to have people around them that they trust. Trust is a big part of business, right? So I don't think that's an issue. And the truth is that's what the governance framework of the JSE is supposed to be protecting us from, right? That's why you have, reports that are supposed to be audited. That's why you have to prove that you are a valid business, right? The merits of those things are supposed to stand on its own, regardless of who you have serving. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it as an issue that it's the same people, right? That's how business works, right? I guarantee you that that's how it is, right? So let me see which company see listed that comes from outside Kingston, RPL alone. You know what? That I won't even touch that. That's another conversation. Thanks, Angela. Keep up the good work as usual. Thanks for the detailed explanation. No problem, Angela. Again, my concern here and the reason for doing this video is for iCreate's shareholders. I would imagine we have community members who are shareholders. So I thought it important to touch on the video to give persons some context as to what is happening, because I figure the questions will come. All right. All right, so final statement I'll take. Anthony saying, let's be honest, the stock market now is about university friends, old bankers, and the same uptown business people. But Anthony, that's business. That's business. That's life. I don't think it's limited to the stock market. All right. Michael, I say you're just joining. So it's actually funny, right? Because the OOO was referenced in the notice today, but the ticker for one is ONE, right? So the OOO is supposed to be one-on-one, but it's not, right? So I thought that was funny to mention, right? All right, David. Thanks again. You have any closing thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
So right now, the best we can do is just hope everything is resolved quickly, because it won't bode well for anybody if
it impacts all of
things
us.
get worse. No, it affects everybody. And the thing is, as you rightfully said, we're looking at the fact that we have our first IPO for the year, and these events occur now. Like, it impacts the potential fundraising that can occur for other companies. And we have to just remember that companies listed on the JSE benefits all of us, as there is greater diversification in the market, and in the same breath, there is the support that comes with getting guidance from senior leaders. So we shouldn't dismiss this current predicament.
Yeah, man, agreed. Confidence in the market is extremely important. It is what drives everything for us as investors, right? Confidence in the market is what allows us to make money, right? So, and I get that's why a lot of persons, so there are persons who only see risk, who see how wrong things can go. And I think there are persons who don't pay attention to risk, meaning for them, there's no issue. The world keeps moving. Everything is fine. I like to be somewhere in the middle, right? So I think I look at it as par for the course, meaning not necessarily that I thought iCreate would be in this position, but as the market grows, there are likely to be companies. It's not the first company to be suspended. It won't be the last, because of the nature of these kind of things, right? There is no process that you go through to list, meaning meaning the expectation is listed companies will be able to adhere to certain policies, but you don't determine how a company complies with the rules, right? So, yeah, and I think it's specific. I'd like to kind of confine what we're talking about here specifically to iCreate, because from what I can see, I'm not sure any other company can necessarily be compared with iCreate specifically right now, right? There are companies that do have an opportunity to improve things, to communicate better, to share more information, etc. But iCreate, to me, specifically was unique in terms of how things were going, right? Because as I said, this is not an overnight kind of thing. It's not like it came from out of nowhere, right? Persons were talking about it for a while now, right? So, but I really do hope that persons would kind of see this as an opportunity to do your due diligence in the companies that you're investing in. Do your due diligence. It can't just be that you're looking at what you can gain and you don't properly weigh what you can lose, right? Because there is risk with every investment, right? All right, David, thanks again. We'll talk soon, all right?
No problem.
All right, guys. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a like. I'll try to post updates when I can in the community group. That's the best place to get updates. And let's just see what happens, right? I'm sure it'll be covered on other platforms and in the news over the coming weeks. So be sure to check those out. We do have a news feed in our Telegram group now as well that you can use to stay updated as the news will come out. If there are no other questions, again, I just want to thank everybody for being here, and look forward to our discussion with One Great Studio this Wednesday at 7 p.m. I believe. We'll be talking to the founders of the company. And so Sean, I would say, so if you look at the article that came out, it did show that trading is at levels lower than the pandemic, I believe, which kind of tells you that not the same amount of persons are in the market now. I think with every offer that comes to market, new investors are attracted. So I think we will see some new persons coming to the market. Quite a bit of persons have reached out to me asking about the offer. I just say to them, please watch our prospectus review, because I can't tell you whether or not you should buy or not. But watch the videos that we put out and make a decision that best suits you, right? All right, cool. So again, guys, I'll see you in the next video.
Learning is the key to successful investing. And who doesn't want to invest in some way?
Here at L.E.A.R.N. Grow Invest, we focus on financial education, all with the aim of sharing our knowledge on personal finance, investing, and building wealth. We do this on the foundation of our faith in God.
If a more holistic approach is what you need, check out our Grow Faith-based financial coaching program.
Find out more about us at learngrowinvestclub.com
and follow us on all social media platforms at L.E.A.R.N. Grow Invest.